Okay, I'd like to call to order the City Council work session meeting of Mondays, March 13th. Is there anyone that would like to make public comment? Okay.
There is a hand up on.
Oh, there is. Hi, Dr. Wayne.
Are you there, Bob?
He's muted.
Maybe he didn't have anything to say.
Dr. Wayne, did you want to make public comment?
No,
Okay.
I'm just.
There is a hand up on.
Oh, there is.
Whoa.
So put your hand down, please.
Dr.
And step away from the phone. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start our discussion item, which is the Cannon Beach Elementary Rejuvenation Project.
I'll start it off.
Sorry.
And thank you, Mrs. Mayor, Miss Mayor.
Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, thank you.
How about just Mayor Barb?
It's the only part I didn't know. It'd be good.
Jeez.
The Cannon Beach Elementary Rejuvenation Project started off with a robust public input process that to me indicated there was pent-up demand for a facility on the Cannon Beach Elementary site that would be enjoyed by residents and visitors alike. Dustin Johnson of CETA will go over the results in a bit more depth in a few moments, but what came out of the effort were visions of capturing our local history, learning about Native culture, protecting the environment, bringing local folks together, providing a peaceful place to think, a place to exercise, and celebrating the elementary school that was such a big part of this town. That's what people talked about. And what Dustin is about to show you is what those things look like when brought together in the design of a facility on a site that also contains an abundance of all those good things. Today's the first step in how do we really make this happen. We will have budget figures based on the preliminary development design drawings. These are rough figures and hopefully lean towards the conservative side. They will be refined as the project moves forward. With that, I'll turn it over to Dustin Johnson.
All right, thank you, Bruce. And I've been forewarned that my voice doesn't carry very well in this space, so if you're having trouble hearing me, signal me and I'll know to turn it up a little bit.
I'm on the desk.
There you go. All right, well, as always, I have to take the opportunity to just tell you how humbling and what an honor it is to be here working in Cannon Beach and on such a special project and a special site. So I'm sharing my screen right now. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit. This is our agenda for today. Bruce just did introductory comments. I'm going to give you a little bit of history on the project, similar to previous COEs. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what all is entailed in a project estimate. What do we look at to make sure that we're capturing everything holistically? And then we're going to go ahead and present our project-specific budget estimate for Cannon Beach Elementary Rejuvenation. And then after that, we'll talk about next steps. Moving on down, zoom out here. But this probably looks familiar to some, either because you were here during the programming phase and you saw this slide, or hopefully, for those of you who weren't, it resembles strongly the current design of the project. The programming phase happened approximately a year ago. It was a 2 to 3 month long process, involved 3 community outreach events. We talked to anybody willing to talk to us, took notes, handed out surveys, collected information, organized it, prioritized it. Out of that came this exhibit that you're looking at, including probably 1,000 pages of notes and surveys and other stuff, but all of that boiled down graphically to this site plan.
Dustin, you blow it up.
Thanks. You bet. Okay. You'll probably notice that bottom yellow block in the the southeast corner of the site. That was an entry plaza that folks wanted, place to be able to congregate at the site and start learning about the history of this site. The north patio is in gold. Again, another communal space, gathering space that could potentially host things that could bring tourists to the site. These could be exhibits, outdoor exhibits. They could be farmers market style events. I know you all have a current farmers market in a different spot. You see a community garden just to the north of the Southeast Plaza. This is currently where our Thunderbird garden is, and it has transformed a little bit from a community garden to more of a cultural heritage garden. The recreational playing field, a huge asset currently for Cannon Beach, and no one wants to see that go. You see an amphitheater there in blue. It's been further defined with collaboration with the tribe, who had the original idea of having an amphitheater out here, at least as I understand. This was quite a few years ago. In the current design, it's no longer just an amphitheater. It's an intimate storytelling circle and fire pit that can be expanded out to accommodate a larger crowd for something like a music event. And then the riparian quarter that you see in kind of a pink there along the edge. Another very important thing to stakeholders that we noted during the programming phase was to make sure that we didn't do anything that sacrificed that corridor. It's habitat to a lot of wildlife, to a lot of plant life. All we were proposing at the end of the programming phase was to restore it and get the the invasive species out of there. And then the estuary beach, again, making sure that we have as good of or better access to that estuary beach than what we have today. This is our current design. The reason why I'm showing you the programming site plan that was, as you saw, basically a bubble diagram, and today's design is that it's important that you know that we've listened and made our design decisions based on those goals that were first captured in the programming phase. So again, the Southeast Plaza down here at the southeast corner of the gym, a place to gather, an activation point for the site. Just to the north of that, our community garden, which has become the Thunderbird Garden, a heritage garden. We have our north courtyard. Throughout the design process, we've added outdoor covered space on 3 sides of that north courtyard. You probably got sick of me saying it during design, but versatility, versatility, versatility. This was one way that we can do that. We can have more outdoor events in more types of weather conditions if we have covered space. We've got our amphitheater, which is now also an intimate story circle. And then, of course, Necuse Park, the playing turf that's there today. Scattered throughout, we also have some site structures over here next to a heritage playground that is part of the bigger heritage garden. We have an open-sided longhouse inspired structure. Again, covered space for the outdoors. The more that we have that, the more it's going to get used throughout the year. And again, over by the amphitheater, another longhouse inspired structure, likely open-sided. And that is to, you'll see a little path going off the north courtyard there. This could be a place to accommodate folks with disabilities while they listen on to a story in the storytelling circle over a bonfire, or it could be housing a band. And then, of course, we've got parking here at the very south edge of the lot. And there will be, I think, additional conversations with you all about what our plans are there. We originally had that in tomorrow's agenda, but I think that's going to get pushed out a little bit. All right. So we're moving on to the third point of our agenda. What is a budget estimate? How do we track? What are we tracking? So in a typical project, and this is not a typical project, but we would be looking at things like property acquisition. How much did it cost to purchase this property, including any structures on it? And what has to be done to those structures to make them usable for the existing project? And then hard costs. So hard costs, this is where we start tracking as a group. And this is specifically the area of the budget that Bremick is in control of. And they'll be presenting that in the next slide. And hard costs, a lot of times people call them brick and mortar costs. So it's everything that gets left behind, but it's also the labor it took to get it there. Soft costs, that's where me and CETA come into play and all of our consultants. This is where permit and jurisdictional fees come in. Pre-construction surveys and testing can't do anything unless we have surveys and tests that show what our existing conditions are that we have to work with and what do we need to be aware of. In this case, significant testing in the soils, right? Because we know that this is a archaeologically rich and sensitive site. And then during testing, we're going to have construction testing and inspections. These are specifically to ensure that the project being constructed is the project that was designed, is meeting those design parameters. FF&E, so a lot of you probably know what that is, some of you may not. It's our fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. So the project is not done when you get certificate of occupancy. Now you just have big open shell and you got to fill it with stuff, right? That's your FF&E. And then we have an owner contingency. We always recommend that the owner carry a contingency for those unforeseen things. We do the best we can to make sure that unforeseens are kept to an absolute minimum. But it would be a mistake to say, don't worry about carrying it. So we always recommend at a very minimum, 5%, even up to a 10% owner contingency. And then beyond that, if this was a private development, we would be talking about facility operation and maintenance costs and looking at the whole thing as basically an asset and making sure that this is a wise investment. This is different because the ultimate goal here is twofold. It's to bring in more tourism and tourist-related dollars. It's also to preserve an incredibly special and historic site. And it just so happens that this type of space is going to fill the need and be a huge asset for the locals, both indoor and outdoor activities. With that, we'll jump right into the budget. Do we have any questions at this point as to what we look at in a budget? Okay. I'm going to zoom in here. And Ben, I'll ask you to take it away with.
Of course. And I second what Dustin was saying. So we're also honored to be part of the team and to work with you all on this. So
Ben, you want to introduce yourself?
of course. So my name is Ben Carlson with Bremick Construction, and this is my colleague, Dave Brookings, also with Bremick. So Dave will be the construction manager during the project, and I'm working on the front end side of this, helping to program the project for success during pre-construction. So as Dustin mentioned, so the construction hard costs are another way said, it's kind of all the stuff left behind. This is what it takes to build the project that's the dream of all of us to deliver for Cannon Beach. And what we've done is taken the construction cost, the hard cost, and broken that down into these various different elements here. These are really a summary piece of what we put together for the estimate, which this fits on the slide a lot better. But just know that behind this, there's several thousand lines of data that we've worked hard with CETA and the Cannon Beach team to develop for the project. And so we've really broken this down into these different elements here. One is selective demolition related to the project. The actual building construction, which has to do with the redevelopment of the buildings themselves and the reskinning of all the buildings. The utility upgrades and site development kind of go hand in hand. There's a fairly robust site development portion of the project as well as landscape. The pre-construction is related to our services, helping set the project up to be successful. And the inflation is an item that will be carried until the project is bought out. And so the 9 months represents from today until then. And it's a difficult one to predict in today's market. We're budgeting towards 0.5% per month for construction inflation until the project is bought out. So the inflation is kind of the piece that hides on a construction budget, but we think it's really important to be transparent here. This is our best guess. Fast forward 9 months from now where the project will sit, which gets you to the construction hard cost total. And I did want to say a few words about how we arrive at that cost. So we've worked with CEDA over the last 6 to 7 months, really working through the design, understanding what is important in the site and understanding the building itself. And so we take the preliminary design documents that have been prepared by CEDA. We use our historical data. We do a detailed estimate for the project. And we also share those with select trade partners to get real-time feedback in the market as well on the project. So that's how we develop what that cost is. And we've, I know you're all seeing this for the first time, just be aware we've gone through this extensively together as a team to make sure that it's reflective of the program that's been requested. May have said a few more things I was supposed to. Back over to you, Dustin.
That's fantastic. I do want to stress that as detailed as Bremick has gotten with their construction estimate, this is all based off of preliminary drawings, the last drawings that you saw at that level of design, and that's schematic design. That's the phase of the design that we're about to wrap up. You have to make a lot of guesses. So some of those are handled with phone calls. Some of them we don't know yet. So they are having to factor in basically a factor of safety. We call it a contingency that will eventually go away as we get more detail in the drawings that they can price from and don't need to carry the contingency anymore. So we move on from hard costs to our soft costs. This first number here, that 360,915, those are your architecture and engineering fees from day one on the project through today. And this is not just CEDA, this is CEDA, this is Red Plains Civil Engineering and Planning. Joyce Jackson and her landscape team, Cezanne with their mechanical, electrical, plumbing, RWDI with their sustainability studies, acoustical engineering, and their thermal envelope consulting. We're not proposing making any changes to that design team moving forward. So as we move from phase 1 A&E fees to phase 2 A&E fees, we still have those consultants taking their designs alongside ours to that next level of working drawings. We're factoring things in and separating them out that now that we have a better idea of what the process is for this particular project, and no two projects are alike. This one, can't stress enough how unique it is from a process standpoint. But we want to make sure we're looking historically on the types of events we've had, level of involvement we've had with the public, with tribal members, with city council, and we're carrying that through. So you know now with this budget, what to expect in terms of CEDA and our consultants and our involvement moving throughout the course of this project. We're going to work with Bruce. We haven't had a chance to really dial in our services and see if we need that level carried through to the end of the project. And we're going to be working on that before we come back to you with our revised budget. And Bruce will talk about that in next steps. Another thing that we have carried in here is the state preservation allowance. This is the State Historic Preservation Office, and they are who has a jurisdictional site on how we're disturbing the earth out there on a highly sensitive archaeological site. They have their own process. That process, we're going to talk about schedule here in a minute. Their process runs more or less concurrently with the land use process. But has some special caveats, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But there's a line item in there to carry that, to manage that process. Our consultants, Red Plains specifically, will be very involved in that as the civil engineer. You carry a geotech engineer as part of the owner's soft costs. You already have a contract with them. They will be heavily involved as well during that process. And then jurisdictional testing and FF&E fees. Again, this is an extension of your soft fees, but these are not architecture and engineering fees. These are fees carried directly by the owner. So again, your archaeology report, this tells us where we can modify the site and to what degree, what depths we need to start being cognizant of, but also what mitigation we have to do to be able to disturb the site. And that mitigation is something that has to be not only approved through the state, but also by the tribal members as well. And then the geotech report that tells us how structurally stable the soil is that we're going to be modifying. So even though we're not building a big new building on this site, we still have to take into account, we have a seismic retrofit that we're doing on that classroom building, or we're adding a couple of beams and footings in the gym, and we need to know what our allowable bearing pressures are. That test will also let us know if we can use the site for stormwater detention and release, so to naturally percolate. And some other things that we don't need to get into here. The FF&E, we talked about that. Again, this project is very unique. So part of that FF&E, we know that we're going to have some tribal inspired furnishings and fixtures throughout. So who's going to design those, right? That's intended to be incorporated in this fee. So not just the equipment itself or the furnishings themselves, but the cost of procuring that, including design. And then down below is our total. This is the total before the owner contingency. We were carrying a range on a few of these items. We talked about the state preservation allowance. We carried a range of $5,000 to $10,000 on that. The geotech report, the city currently has a contract with the geotech. It's a little under $10,000. However, we know that the civil engineer is going to request more areas that need to be tested. So we've thrown in an allowance there. Permitting fees. This is one area that can get a really big number, and I mean a really big number, because a lot of projects have what we call system development charges. Those are charges brought on by the jurisdiction to help with various things, but ultimately it's public infrastructure, utility infrastructure, that because this project is existing, we don't have. That said, we don't have a grand total yet. We still have conversations that we need to have with the planning department. So we're carrying a range here. So we think we're going to be anywhere from 118,000 to 145,000. And again, that's money paid to the city of Cannon Beach and tucked away for public infrastructure. And then construction testing. This is another consultant that you will have. We reached out to one. It doesn't have to be that. They all kind of run pretty tight numbers if you're to go out to multiple, but we got a range of 14,000 to 23,000. And then the FF&E, again, we reached out to some of our FF&E consultants to get a range. What we're showing is actually their low range of 269,000 to their medium range of 436,000. They had another range, but after looking at that total and comparing it to the types of stuff we're going to have on this project, not applicable. So we're comfortable saying that we think your high is going to be their mid-range of 436,000. So those are the ranges. That's the reason why the total down here has a low and a high. after the owner contingency, and again, that's what we're showing here is a 5% owner contingency, and that 5% is not only across the hard costs, we recommend it be carried across soft costs as well. So it's your total plus the 5% for owner contingency. And here's what we have developed is your ultimate grand total range. This project is going to be in the 11.7 to 11.9 million as currently designed. I think with that, we can open it up to questions. I know there's a lot of numbers in here and, but I think before we move on to.
Let me go ahead and just read this and then we can get into the questions. Reaching up the point where you can all get serious about deciding if this project the city can support and construct. Previously, there are too many unknowns to be able to set a realistic budget. Next step is investigate ways to fund the project, or to make modifications to the project design. We're ready for that discussion as soon as we can get it on your busy schedule. We will bring our financial advisor to discuss that aspect of the project to a dedicated funding discussion. Ready for that discussion, as I said about the busy schedule. And I want to make the comment that both this project and the City Hall Police Station are doable, but it will take some bold action and a willingness to make hard decisions to make them happen. So with that, is there any questions on anything presented?
Are we all in shock or what?
Yeah. And as far as the cost of the project, remember what we started out with is, what do you want to see? And hopefully we've accomplished those things, especially some of the things related to education and the tribal history and even the school. So that can be pulled back, but it doesn't take to go too far back before all of a sudden it really doesn't work anymore. And those are some of the hard decisions that you'll have to make. We'll make recommendations for you if you wish, but it is a council decision moving forward.
So earlier in the work, there was talk of phasing the operations. Is that off the table?
No, it's not off the table, but it's there are probably chunks that we can go ahead and pull out and do them later. Where the difficulty lies is that we have a chance, if we fund it, we can fund it now. And we will use, and there's various things that will come into play. But if you use those up, and then you say, well, we want to do something else, we want to do the colonnade or whatever, I don't know where the funding would necessarily come from. And so it's like your house. You say you want to go ahead and we'll add those extra 3 bedrooms later on and never quite get there. So, but it is possible to phase. I don't know. When you phase, it tends to cost you more overall than it would otherwise. And it depends what it is we phase out. That was a good question. We start talking about maybe where we might go, and that might get you out of your days. We have started looking at a number of funding sources, and we have been watching. We have somebody watching the bond market, and we have some relative costs, and we've looked. Well, first, there's always a possibility of reducing the magnitude of the project. And then what the previous council we'd worked on was trying to minimize the cost to the current residents. A lot of time, I mean, I don't think anybody should expect that a project like this is going to be free. But what we were able to do early on, when we did the first bond for this project, when we looked at it back then, it was around 3% all in, but now it's more to 4, a little bit higher. And so the cost has gone up considerably for financing. And we had back then in this project, when we were looking at the amount, which is 70% of 1% that county sends us, that 70%, it was enough to pay the debt service as projected, plus having maybe about 25-30% available for operations. What's happened is that the funds that were going to be available for potentially for operations, they've all been absorbed in the debt service, as is a lot of other money has to go into that debt service. So it's getting harder for us to say that there will be no cost associated with that we'll have money every year to be able to go ahead and take care of maintenance. I don't know how that's going to work out. A lot of it has to do with the discussion that we have coming up. So, and then also we purposely put this, we figured that, well, we knew we were going to kind of knock your socks off with the presentation today, so wait till tomorrow. But we wanted to put them both together. They really don't have funding sources that are competing with each other, but they're both big numbers and they're big decisions to make. And then also City Hall Police Station project took a weird turn when we found out about the inability to site the police station in this location. And then also that the restrictions are so drastic that the only site that can possibly work is the south wind. We had other sites earlier on in our discussion, but those won't necessarily work without building up quite a bit. So we're kind of limited there. And so your choices are limited, I guess.
So when will we be expecting our first set of drawings? Get an idea about what this will really look like.
I thought that we kind of produced a lot of that with the preliminary design.
So the schematic design drawings, what you've seen today, that would wrap up the schematic design phase. And then from there, we would go into design development. And that's where you're taking those schematic concepts, making them, your first round of working drawings to really price from. I think what we want to try to do is get the most bang for your buck by not getting too far along in the design with working drawings before we say, yeah, you know what, let's go ahead and hold off on that piece.
Okay.
Brandon, we gave you a lot today. It's been a little bit since we've showed anybody what those drawings were. Can you still access those?
Mm-hmm.
Can I do a short presentation on the project itself?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is our COE number 6 presentation. Sorry about that. It looks good, I promise. Okay. There we go. Okay, we talked about the site. Nothing's changed between the end of COE number 6, which was roughly 6 weeks ago, and today. Our next slide was showing how much of the existing school was going to be retained and incorporated.
Justin, why don't you, if you don't mind, walking through that last drawing also? I don't think everybody has seen it all yet.
Sure. Through the site here.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So hopefully this looks very reminiscent of that bubble diagram at the end of programming. We've always thought of the Southeast Plaza here at the southeast corner of the gym, right on the intersection of Beaver and First Street, as a place for people to congregate and to use that opportunity to activate the site. Driving in off the First Street Bridge, currently today, you've got a massive structure out there, one of the biggest in town, and really it's just quiet. So in using this, opportunity to celebrate a place of gathering. We had talked early on about making this a place to really try to activate and engage the drivers by. Accessed just north of that is the Thunderbird Garden. This garden was developed in a high degree of collaboration with Clatsop Nehalem tribe. It is intended to feature native plants that were valued from anything from medicinal purposes to crafts by the tribe. In this area, those plants would have identification signs on them. And as you get out of the Thunderbird Garden and up further up into the Heritage Garden and into that riparian corridor, it becomes you have the same plantings, but without that interpretive signage. So you kind of learn about the plants in the Thunderbird Garden, then you go out to discover them yourself beyond that. Also accessed off the Southeast Plaza is our entrance to the new addition. One thing that we talked about a lot during programming, and this came up from tribal and non-tribal members alike. It was one of the many humbling areas to see people really want to harness conceptually. That when somebody comes to this site, it's a unique enough and a historical enough site, culturally, that when people come here, they need to understand the soil that they're walking on. And the Southeast Plaza being that point of origin at that southeast corner of Beaver and Fur Street for pedestrians, also for cars driving into park on the site. This is the place where you start telling that story. We always talked about starting that story in the Southeast Plaza and continuing it through, at the time, what we called a welcome center. And we've gone away from calling it a welcome center. Now it's our COE lobby. And then that's kind of the protected area inside where you really get a high level of learning about the ways of the Clatsop Nehalem tribe, about the historical significance of the site, maybe even about what you're about to experience out on the north side of that property. And then from there out to the north courtyard, and it starts becoming more of that multi-purpose outdoor community use and tourism use. The gym building, we would remove, as we were showing in this slide right here, the existing mezzanine on the north end, but still keep the gym nice and open to be used for everything from indoor functions, again, the types of functions that could be drawing in tourists and tourism dollars, to everyday sports, pickleball, volleyball, basketball, for when it's not being used for tourism purposes. Could also be used, it has a very unique acoustical shape to it. And depending on how you set people up in there, and I'll let the acoustic engineer speak to this in greater detail than I'm able to, but depending on how you set up in there, what type of event, whether it's something like a choir or a speech, an electrified band, it can have outstanding acoustics in there with somewhat little change. And then the classroom building, again, this was a school, and that history is always going to be there. We want to continue to use that classroom building for educational purposes, for workshops, for small meetings, even not so small meetings. I'll show you a floor plan here where a couple of these rooms could be opened up to each other, and you could fit upwards of 100 people in one of these rooms. And then, of course, Nicky's Park, the playing area, the playing turf, largely unmodified from today. And then to the west of that, our storytelling circle, again, developed in high collaboration with the tribe. And having that circle be a small, intimate space for reflection and storytelling, but also to be able to open up and what we have proposed is a driftwood landscape where people can sit, but not on anything so formal as, benches and seats. And in an effort to open that space up to a grander type of event, bigger audience.
I can just jump in quick. We're already collecting driftwood.
Yeah.
We had a good season for driftwood with the storms. So a lot of that you see on the beach all of a sudden will be disappearing. Getting ready.
And I think the last thing I'll point out on the site plan is the food bank. This was another one of those humbling areas where everybody seemed to coalesce around. The food bank is important. It's important not just for the locals who use it. It's extremely important for the tribe. They see this place as a place of giving. This was a stop for adventurers on their way up and down the coast. And they would show the necessary respect for another tribe. They would be given shelter. They would be given food. They see the food bank as an extension of that value. All right, this is our existing.
Just another thing about the food bank.
Yeah.
One of the things that's always troubled us is that if we were to when we put restrooms in here, there's a whole beach area that is not served by a restroom. And that is not the right mix if you're bringing in kids and everything else, is if you're having something that's a little bit more formal. So what we've come up with is to put the beach restroom on the backside of the food bank. So that's really where everybody goes in and out through there. So that's something that we're trying to do to try to avoid that potential conflict.
I'll just draw a little cloud around that area so you know where Bruce is talking about. And whether it's on, I think that's the corner you're talking about, because that's away from those spruce
There's
trees.
someplace in there, I don't know if it'll be attached to the food bank, but the idea that there is a place that will get that service, but not necessarily coming in and to the lobby of the facility.
Bruce, that is not in the scope of the project right now, though.
No, nothing that, the food bank is not. It'll be made part of their contract, but it'll be paid for out of the general fund. We really haven't talked about the funding side of the restrooms. That's something that could be within the scope because it is tourism related. So it's possible that it'll end up there. Right now, we were just trying to sort out the potential conflict.
Okay. So the demolition plan, in our existing building analysis, we determined that the existing mezzanine at the north end of the gym is highly unusable for anything on that surface, on that second level or mezzanine level. The reason for that was twofold. Structurally, not capable of holding storage or anything else that might be usable for that space, maybe a little bit of light storage. The bigger problem was accessibility. So for anyone who's been up there, there's probably 6 or 7 different floor levels that are abrupt or in some cases upstairs, or in some cases a ladder or a couple ladders. So it's when we look at the type of mezzanine for this place, we want it to be more accessible and also not at this end of the mezzanine. That was another big piece of the programming puzzle. When people envision this space and they envision being in it for whatever function is going on that particular day, they want to be able to see out the north end of that towards the estuary. Over here at the classroom building, you'll see the existing breezeway is only about 12 feet wide. So we looked at schemes where we didn't have, we had very little demolition of that existing classroom building, but 12 feet in width was just not enough to do what we felt needed to be done from a cultural heritage standpoint and using our CBE entry lobby to educate the visitors of this site. So what we had proposed was removing that first structural bay. And this is where existing toilet rooms and the furnace and all the electrical equipment and a few offices are located. And then building that back and attaching the two structures together. You see one wall over here proposed to be demolished in between these two classrooms. That would be built back as a folding partition so that two of these classrooms could be opened up. And you could go then from having an event space of maybe anywhere from 25 to 50 people in a single classroom to 50 or 100 people in these combined classrooms. And then you look at scaling up from that, you'd go to the gym where you could have potentially a couple of hundred people or more. You see a lot of dashed lines on the classroom building because these existing windows, those storefronts, they're steel single glazed from an energy code standpoint. We got to pull them out, put in new ones. We also have the seismic upgrade. So we need to be adding more stud wall and less glass, specifically on that south side to make it work.
And the seismic upgrade for this building and the roof has already been completed on a different contract.
And just to clarify that, Bruce, it's the seismic upgrade for the gym has been completed and the re-roof for the classroom building has been completed.
The which?
The gym's done.
You're right.
Not the classroom. So that's in the roof for the classroom.
Rest of the classrooms what I was talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But the classrooms aren't seismic.
They have not been seismically upgraded. That's in scope.
Okay.
And here's the floor plan. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. Again, we took that existing mezzanine off the north side. Now we can open up the north end of that building to views of the estuary. Down on the south side, we added mezzanine back in. We need a place to be able to put mechanical equipment for both the gym and potentially also the CBE lobby. The other thing this functions as, and the only place this has a mezzanine, I'll clarify a little bit, you see that main gym vestibule entrance right there? That's envisioned to be open to roof structure above. So it's to the right of that over the men's and women's toilet rooms where we're proposing a little bit of a mezzanine. The other thing that mezzanine would function as is from time to time, hopefully more often than time to time, you'll have events in there that need to be supplemented with stage lighting, with audio video equipment. So we envision there being a back of house office up there where someone can control those things behind a window. And they've got kind of a bird's eye view of everything going on. The CBE lobby itself. Again, this is intended to be a very tribal space, but that is also a versatile space. So you can you can use this as another classroom. You can use this as an art exhibit, but the stuff that you can't roll in and out of there, stuff that you can't take off the walls, that's the history of this place that the tribe wants to tell. We're doing that. We're showing you a kind of a fun little map on the floor in this image, and that's the part of the northwest corner of the state. And there are several significant landmarks within this that are valued by the tribe and their ancestors. And so part of the interior of the lobby space would be pointing those out at the floor level and then in a way projecting that up on the wall with other exhibits that give you more information and detail about those landmarks. From that space, it opens up into your first classroom. That first classroom can be opened up into the second classroom. The classroom on the far end would be its own approximately 25 to 50 person event space. Again, meeting rooms, art exhibits, crafting, workshop space. And then we go from that to what we designed as the exterior architecture. I made the comment in the last COE that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this in the next slide. It's there for scale. So you can understand like that CBE lobby. How big is it relative to the classroom? How big is it relative to the gym? The reason why I don't like to spend a lot of time on this is the white roofs that you would never see at ground level. Yeah, they would actually be white. It's an energy saving measure. We call them cool roofs. And so that would be you can get it in different colors as well, but if you don't have me here telling you what that is, someone might look at that and say, what is he thinking? It doesn't snow in Cannon Beach, or very rarely, right? So same thing on this side, showing you everything in context and in scale. So then we jump down to a eye level view to the southeast courtyard, looking back. And again, I want to reiterate, these are schematic level drawings. I think there was a comment made that we're showing a lot of hard surfaces for sitting around the welcoming lady who's standing up above and welcoming Western visitors to the site facing east. We're not proposing final materials here. And we're going to develop that very closely with the tribe. They have a specific value in building materials, especially in these more tribal focused areas, of using materials that would not have been unknown to their ancestors. Okay. We're going to try to not use concrete and steel and those kinds of things in those types of spaces, specifically Southeast Entry Plaza and the Storytelling Circle. Let me show you, we've taken the entrance to the CBE lobby and extended it out to the Southeast Entrance Plaza. We did that for a number of reasons. It was significant to the tribe that we had that. It offers a threshold to that CBE lobby that extends out again to that point of origin on the site where we start to tell the story of the Clats of Nehalem and the significance of the site. This is standing back at the classrooms again on Beaver Street, just looking towards the northeast. We talked a little bit last time, the existing school has brick veneer on it, and it's not really a material you see a whole lot of in Cannon Beach. When we go to do our seismic upgrade, we're going to be pulling almost all of that brick off just to be able to accommodate the upgrade. So we're kind of offered a new canvas, and to help make this place feel a little bit more, we still want it to feel like a school, like a former school. But how do we make it fit into the vernacular of Cannon Beach architecturally? And then here's a image of the new CBE lobby. Again, this is the 12-foot wide breezeway, and then taking over that first structural bay of the classroom building, and it would be reconstructed as the CBE lobby. It's the gateway to the back of the site, and it offers as a transition, an indoor transition from the gym to the classroom building and vice versa. Here we're looking at the classrooms from the north courtyard. Again, we don't want to turn our backs on, this was an elementary school filled with kids learning and laughing and having fun. A lot of what you see in elementary schools dating back to the dawn of time is the use of primary colors and a lot of colors. And it doesn't have to be, speak to current design rules or aesthetics. It's okay to be more playful with this. Standing a little bit closer to the entrance, again in the north courtyard, looking back at the CBE entry. And then we had shown a couple options for the north end of the gym to consider and think about. We talked a little bit about how it's important to folks during the programming phase that the north end of the gym not only open up visually to the estuary, but also physically open up and be able to have a space that internally could support 100, 200, 300 people, but in nice weather could then start to extend out and really become a nice large venue for a variety of purposes. And then this one here, again, the north side of that gym building. This time it's opening up with swivel doors. That's what you're seeing. We're showing them here as 5-foot doors. And in retrospect, I would have made them 7 feet so that when they pivot and they pivot on their center, so it becomes an opening on either side of that door that's big enough to meet egress purposes. And then the rest of these we didn't go into in the COE because they're more technical drawings for the handful of folks that want to see, you know, the more of the details. What's your top plate height? You know, what are your windows that you're proposing?
I'd like you to show the lobby.
Yeah, so this is the interior lobby. And I was going to put Maya in our office on point here. It's going to surprise her, but it looks like she had to drop off. But she would present this very well, and I'll do my best. So
I'm here, Dustin.
yes, amazing. All right, take it away.
Yeah, so this is just really trying to show all of the elements that we've been talking about with the city, with the tribes, with everybody. And again, making sure that this is a space that really conveys the importance of this site. So as a quick introduction to sheets, you know, I've got like the pretty images there towards the top of the page, but the rest of it is really to show you some of the concept ideas. So we've got the inspiration photos there that are showing some of the lighting features that we're showing in the rendering. A lot of these speak to the natural elements as far as the wood and the land and the ocean. The one image there has the basket weave lights that we are showing just as a representation, you know, what that actual basket weave design is. We're hoping for quite a bit of input from the tribe. The carved door there in the middle, those are a couple of different options. Our thought was the main entry into this lobby space really wants to speak to the tribe specifically, and the Thunderbird obviously is a very important image. So there's a couple options shown there, whether it be a carved door or a glass insert door. Which way that goes, obviously, will kind of evolve as we go through the conversation. Sorry, I'm going to try to turn on my camera too, so you guys can at least see me, which I don't know if the lights are working. Then we also have the necklace there, the beadwork. Again, this is an important bead, an important color for the tribe. So we're trying to show that in the space in ways that allude to it. Obviously not highly representational, but just little ways to hint at it. Dustin, the one below, refresh my memory what that, yeah, what's that little piece? Is that a close-up of the images?
Exactly. That was showing a way to screen print onto transparent material to create these photographs on a larger scale.
Yeah. So that's a close-up of basically right next to it is an image. And again, when we look at the renderings, I'll kind of direct you to where those are. And then above that is the map of the coastline. So our thought on that, that image goes along with, yep, the floor plan right there, where you're going to see the coastline. You're going to see these areas that are of importance, and they'll have, you know, historical names, current day names, tribal names, all ways to help people really see where we're at and understand the importance of all these spaces. Yeah, so this is an image looking towards the gym building within that lobby. So you'll start to pick up some of these elements that I've talked about, where you've got the basket lights hanging, you've got those other lights hanging that are kind of in a wave motion as far as height and undulations. Those images that are in the far background, Those are black and white images. Again, we're considering those being printed on resin. And they're standing off vertical off the top of the lower portion of the wall. And then that barrel vault is pulling away from it. So you have kind of a play on light from behind it so that those would stand out more. This whole space, we're showing a lot of wood. Again, speaking to the tribe's influence, but also just the area in general. So you've got some wood on the walls, you've got the raw poles for the columns. You're seeing the underside of the car decking. So it's all very warm and natural. And then this is looking back towards the main doors. So you again are going to see that carved main door coming in with that Thunderbird image on it. Again, what that image actually looks like. This is a starting point for us to have that conversation. What you're also looking at on this video is looking back towards the classroom entry. We didn't want that to feel like an afterthought. We wanted definitely to draw people's eye and attention. So we're showing some of those accents in there. Again, you've got those tiles that are mimicking that beadwork. So nice, bright, bold cobalt blue, and the light colored tiles as well. Again, what the design is, we're not quite there yet, but these are representations of those elements. That space also, we're showing the wood on the ceiling there too, because it does drop down a little bit. So that again gives it an identity. Then you do also have the presentation boards that are up on the wall. Our thought was those would have a tile backer to it, that they're actually inset and permanent, but the applied placards that might be on there might be something that represents, that rotates out from time to time. You might have a few that are standard, but some of that could change with events or exhibits that you want to showcase. And then the flooring, again, showing that insert. And our thought here was you have that cobalt blue insert there, and that could relate to one of the images or one of the informational pieces that are in those presentation walls. So again, you're walking through the space, you look down, you notice something, and it points you to a place to go find more information. So it's a very engaging space. And then this is just trying to show you the versatility of the layout. Our thought is that all of the furniture pieces are mobile, so they would come and go to suit the needs for what you have going on at any given day for any given event. So just showing some ideas as far as just standard benching or display cases that are set up for an exhibit, or perhaps it's a training session, or just a kind of more of a lobby area. Again, back to Dustin's key about versatility, versatility, versatility.
And then for COE number 6, we did one rendering. We picked a early morning hours to show you that this place can really be a landmark.
Dustin, you have this schedule. I was thinking that would be helpful to answer the question that was being asked.
Yeah, so Jennifer just read my mind. The project design schedule, we have a very schematic schedule here. This is based off a very detailed, what we call a Gantt format chart that is difficult to look at if you're not used to looking at them every day. So we made one that was a little more friendly. This shows schematic design, and I'm going to clarify the names of some of these because they're a little misleading. Schematic design actually incorporates the programming phase as well. So programming and schematic design was approximately beginning of July to 4/4 this year. That 4/4 is, I don't know if we have it on the schedule yet, Rusty and Jen, or if that's.
We talked about taking it to council meeting, but I don't know if we have it on there yet.
Okay, it's a
Beginning of March.
beginning of April.
Oh, we just have City Hall on.
That's the 5th.
Fifth.
It's right now it's a conceptual date to come back to you. after we've had a chance to tighten up our numbers and to take into account anything that you may want to see. You may tell us to leave today and come back, showing you some cost reducing alternates, and we would come back with that information. Design development, that's what we are wanting to move into. So we're at the tail end right now of schematic design. That meeting that's shown with you on 4/4 now, that hasn't been scheduled yet, but, and it will probably flux within. We would seek authorization at that meeting to, based on the current figures, the budget information and the design, to move forward with the next phase of design, being design development. That's where we take these schematic design documents and we start really drilling into, okay, how are we going to build this thing? Exactly what materials are we going to use? How's this going to be weather tight? How's the acoustics going to work? And so on and so forth. We start developing those drawings in design development, and then we carry that into construction documents to make them actual working drawings. What's easier to show in a GAMP format, and I'll show you a real simplified version of one. It's at the end of this presentation, but it shows how some of these things are happening concurrently. So for example, we're designing the design development level of our drawings and taking them to that next level of detail. We're also submitting for land use approval, and that's a 5 to 6 month process with the city of Cannon Beach. And during that time, we're starting the review process and the field work for the archaeology and the State Historic Preservation Office. And the applications they want to see, the mitigation measures that they want feedback on from the tribe.
That meeting's this Friday. We start this Friday.
It's Friday, that's right.
We do have a meeting at the end of March on 28th on hold as well.
We might try to grab that one, Jen, for the financing,
Of CBE.
both.
Well, yeah, so we do have one. It was originally for CBE milestone, but we do have that date on hold with council for whatever we need it on.
If that works for you all.
It's one that's been pre-scheduled. Right. Yeah.
This next phase on here, we have it as construction drawings, maybe better represented as construction development. So yes, this is the phase where we take our design development drawings, which we will come to you for approval at the end of that phase, for your approval to move forward with construction drawings. And this is really getting into the nuts and bolts of how we're going to put this thing together. But again, there are things happening concurrently here. So we have our construction drawings. We take that to a level that we can submit for building permit. We get that permit process started. That can be anywhere from 12 to 24 weeks. We're going to use that time while it's in for building permit to refine some of the things that bidders and builders are going to care about, that life safety and building permit reviews, maybe not so much. And also what's happening in that phase is the subcontractor bid process. So we have our CMGC. We know who the GC on the project is going to be, but they're going to have several trades that they need to bring on board to accomplish very specific portions of work. When we have that bid set of drawings that we develop further than the construction drawings, once the construction drawings are in for building permit review, then they take those drawings, they send them out to their bidders, and they get very, very dialed in numbers from their subcontractors. At the end of that, and at about the time that we pull permit, Remic's going to come back and they're going to propose their GMP to you.
Right.
And that GMP, yeah, go ahead.
Well, maybe I could say a few words about that. So what the GMP is, so that's a guaranteed maximum price for the project. So Dustin's team will put together the construction documents for the project. We take those construction documents as the construction manager, general contractor, which is the CMGC acronym, and we put those out to the market, and it's bid at all subcontractor levels for the project. So that's through a very open and transparent process so that you as the council know that you're getting the best value at each one of those trade levels for the project as well.
It's a public bidding process.
It is. So it's very, very open. It'll be a 4 to 6 week process. We are strongly motivated, encouraging local participation as well for that process. We collect all those subcontractor bids back together. We put together our book of recommendations for award for those projects. We'll review those with Bruce and the rest of the team as well. Again, that's all very open and transparent process so that you can be assured that you're getting the best value at each one of those trades. And that rolls into what we call the GMP, so the guaranteed maximum price, which is the project construction cost for the project. So I think we'll talk about when and how that comes back to you all as well. And I'll let Dustin talk a little bit more about that. Once that is approved, then we do move into construction. And I don't know if this is where I talk again or not.
Sure, yeah. Jump in.
So you can see leading up to that process. So Dustin's got rolled into construction drawings there. Sorry, I didn't wear my glasses today and that's a little far away. So I apologize for that. But for construction kickoff, we have that as an anticipated February of 24 start. And we're tracking 44-week or approximately 10-month construction duration from start to finish of the project. So that has delivery in December of 2024 and open for business.
I was a little bit cruel before the meeting. I cut out a week from your construction schedule, so I didn't have you ending right before Christmas.
That's probably nice for everybody, actually.
And I'd like to add something. Some of you weren't here when we were going through the process of selecting an architect and then selecting the CMGC. It's on a previous slide, but what happened is that Remick is working with us right now, and they are paid a fee for this design work that they're doing, for putting together the bid packages, all those things. It's about $24,000, $25,000. But once they get to the GMP part, they will be paid that relationship, the technical relationship between the architect and the CMGC ends at that point, and you become the contractor in that. But we will continue to have the good relationship that we have. But from that point, they will be paid a certain percentage, and I forgot what it was, but it was part of their proposal when they were selected of what's called the cost of the work. That's a term of art that these things are part of the cost of the work. These things are not. You don't get paid for those. So, but right now we're still in that phase where they are just producing whatever needs to be produced in order for us to be able to continue our process.
Right. And so just something again to reiterate that I think is really important through the CMGC process. So, Remick is hired to do the management, the orchestration of the work itself. So that's done with what we call general conditions, which are the management of the project. It'll be an on-site superintendent. It'll be a part-time project manager for the project. And that's all included in the cost that you can see on the screen there. What we do is and I think what's really important to reiterate again is that, all the pieces of the project are bid out competitively on that market right there. And we review all those bid results with the design team, with the Cannon Beach team as well. And then there's just a fixed fee on top of that that's been pre-negotiated based on our competitive selection already. So it's a very open process. And so we want to make sure that everyone feels and understands that they are getting the best value for that.
And the last thing I wanted to point out on schedule, told you I'd bring up a simple Gantt chart, but this is what the abbreviated schedule that you saw previously is based on. But these black bars over here represent periods of time. So you can see where they overlap vertically, multiple things are being coordinated to happen at the same time. If we look down here, and I'm just going to cloud these for you. We've got land use review that is happening concurrently with the State Historic Preservation Office review and Doug Doerr's team with the field work. And then construction drawings. So I mentioned that the land use review process, it's 30 days completeness review, and then 120 days of actual review process. But between the completeness review and the actual review, it's probably going to come back to us. We need additional information on this, and this. We resubmit it. That's probably a couple of weeks. long and the short of it, it's a lengthy process, 5 or 6 months. But it doesn't have to be lost. We can be developing our construction documents as soon as we are in for land use review. So that when we get our land use approval, our notice of decision, with conditions of approval, we'll be ready to roll into construction documents shortly after that. We need some time to be able to incorporate design revisions that speak to whatever conditions of approval we have from the planning department and the engineering department, fire department. Any questions about the design schedule and construction schedule, the overall project schedule?
Uncharacteristically quiet. I'm thinking how, we can move forward. There's probably not a lot to discuss right now. We have a discussion tomorrow about a project that's even higher cost. And then the date tomorrow is what, the 14th? And then I think it was the 28th was the date that we can sit down, hopefully with the our financial advisor, and then talk about, there's going to be a gap to fill between, like on this project, between what we pay for, we've already collected in the TLT and what our future collections are likely to be. And then there's going to be, you can buy that much debt service. With that debt service, you can buy this much of the project. And then there's going to be another amount that we need to make up or reduce in cost.
When are we going to have, that's just what I'm really curious about is the gap. I'd like to, do we have any kind of so we can start thinking about funding sources. Do we have any idea what that gap is right now?
No, the 28th we will. We just got these numbers and we're trying to set something up with our financial advisor and trying to get ready. Now, I don't know exactly how long that would take, but if you want to try to make it earlier than the 28th, it's just another meeting. I would say we would need at least a week, 10 days. So we're almost there.
Yeah, because that's the big issue, obviously, for all of us is how do we make what the gap is and how do we make it up if we want to go forward with, which essentially is a $12 million project if you take the high end of it.
Right.
So that, and I think everyone would love that.
Yeah.
But it's just, can we do it? And so we have to start thinking about it as soon as possible.
And we will bring you all options, including those that you will have great disdain for. No matter what it is, we'll give it to you, and then you can make your decisions on that. We're not going to hold anything back because you might not like it.
Oh, other options, yeah.
Pull it all out.
We'll get it all.
And people will get excited. Okay? You get to do this again tomorrow. A more difficult one.
And so when do we have the discussion about potential ways to scale back or phase this?
Probably on the 28th or after the 28th, because really the discussion is going to be about the gap. If there's an interest to fund the entire project, then we'll get into that. And if it's something that you're not crazy about, and say, well, we want to scale back to a certain amount. But we've talked about it at the staff level and at the design team, that it's going to be possible for them to put together, if you don't do this, there's this much savings. If you don't do this, there's this much savings. And we'll try to get that to you in advance if we can. So you'll have a chance to look at it. And then we start talking about the hard decisions.
So you don't need anything from us today, really. You just wanted to
Did you bring your checkbook?
get us in the ballpark or shock us.
Yeah, this was an informational meeting, and obviously we wanted members of the public to be a part of it too. It was a fully transparent process. So we've listened to what Cannon Beach wants. We've listened to the tribe and to you all as the owner of the project. And we've developed that to the point that we've developed today. And that price tag is what we had presented.
Madam Mayor, do you want to ask if there's anybody in the audience that wants to speak?
Do they have any money? No.
They have the money. We are the money.
Is there anyone that would like to make any comments? Come on up to the podium.
I'm Tim Ramey, resident 628 Oak Street. Really more a question than a comment. So a guaranteed maximum price is a form of insurance that you purchase. There's always a cost to it. It's never free. In a loose construction market, you go with a bid price. In a tight construction market, you typically go with a time and materials kind of price. What is that insurance costing us, if rough and round? And should we, and is it advisable?
I would say yes, but I'm thinking, I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. So a guaranteed maximum price isn't insured. Maybe I'm not following what you mean by.
From a risk manager's perspective, it is. Okay. So
Oh,
do you think you could do this project cheaper on a time and materials basis if, you know, every contractor always says, you're gonna hold my feet to the fire? I'm building 20% in because you'll hold my feet to the fire if I'm wrong. So there's always that. And I understand from a political perspective why we might want to buy that insurance, that guaranteed maximum price insurance. But is it advisable?
Yes, and here's why. I'm sorry I didn't understand it first.
Yeah.
So the guaranteed maximum price is the maximum amount the project would cost. An important distinction that we really haven't elaborated on some of the details to that is that it's an open book process with all the accounting being public. It's a public project, so it's all available. An important distinction with a GMP is that if there are savings on the project, those do accrue back to the owner. So the work is contracted out at that amount. But if the project comes back under budget, there can either be situations where there's a savings split between the contractor and the owner. In this case, I believe everything accrues back to the owner though. So it really is an assurance that that's the maximum amount you'll be paying. If it comes in less, you do receive that money back into the community.
Okay.
So I apologize. I didn't follow your question at first.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Jen?
I'm Jan Seaver, Orman, P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach. I just wanted to say, I think all of us are still excited about this project, even though it looks very expensive from what we were maybe thinking it might. But I know when I go home tonight, I'm going to make a list of every way that I can think of that we can pull this off, and think of all my friends who have a little bit of extra money, or maybe some who have more than a little bit of extra money. And just, I think if all of us do that, we as a community can truly embrace this project. And it's beautiful. And I just want to make it happen. So anything we can do, it's got to do this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. And along those lines, none of us mentioned it, but we're going to be looking for grants, federal grants. We've talked to the tribe to see if they can find some, that are, recognizing the history of those kind of things. And we're working with Crest, and we're a member of Crest, for them to kind of take the lead on this, do the research, to find what grants might be available and then pursue those grants. There is a cost associated with that, but we're a member, and we are, there's money in the budget for this type of work. So we are trying to do something along those lines, Jan. And then I've had a conversation, started a conversation regarding naming. As soon as you say naming rights, people get, kind of cringe. But are there elements that somebody might be willing to fund? Maybe the Thunderbird doors or the gym floor. Because one of the things I'm so excited about is that gym is that everybody remembers the paint, white paint up there. these folks had suggested we go ahead and we essentially sandblast it. So it's all raw wood. Then you have a beautiful wood floor underneath it. That's gonna be gorgeous. You know, with the lighting and things. So is somebody willing to go ahead and say, you know what, that's worth it. It's a game changer for that piece of, that particular location. So I'll do that. So we're trying all kinds of things. But when we have our discussion, I don't think we can count on any and saying we expect to get this much money from donations and things like that. It's too early. We have to go through a process. We have to meet their grant cycles, all those kind of things. So anything that we can do along those lines, that'll just help us in the end. But I don't know if we'll know too much early on.
Dick, did you want to say something?
Hi. Dick Dash, 1126 Avenue F in Seaside. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, they already heard from you last time. But I was in a meeting this last week with Doug Doerr. And he couldn't be here today. And so I'm sort of sharing my version of what he had to say. And that is that this site and this project, I'm really humbled to hear you say that this is a tribal element or this was important to the tribe. And I thank you for that. But this project is really so much bigger than us in the room here. There are so few places on the coast where a city has an opportunity and shares a footprint of a village that was there for thousands of years, whose outline of the house posts we can see just under that soil through the X-ray, the LiDAR. And it is also, as I mentioned before, I worked for the National Park for the Lewis and Clark Trail. And I've wandered the trail, well, not wandered actually, but have been all along the trail. And there's just about 2 or 3 spots where we actually know that Lewis and/or Clark lived. And that's one of them. That place has so many stories that are so meaningful to so many people, including the kids that went to school there. There's so many issues or pieces of history that are so important to so many people. And I think we need to remember that people will be coming that will want to see those stories. And the Lewis and Clark, the tribal, and the school. So I think we should look for funding for special projects outside of our community, outside of the state, on a much bigger scale, because the interests are there in the history of that place. That was Doug. No. Thank you.
I hear you in it too, Dick.
Is there anyone else? Nita?
Nita Duber, PO Box 694, Cannon Beach.
And it's a beautiful rendition building. This whole project is wonderful. And I guess I would just say that I hope that the subcontractors and architect or landscapers could all be as local as possible to have a hand in this project that Cannon Beach is taking on. So.
Go right ahead. To the degree possible, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nita.
I have a question about the schedule and the potential grants that we might be seeking. And the cost. How do we coordinate the schedule for finishing in December of 2024 when grant dates are so different, and sometimes you don't get that grant until that next year or the year beyond, and sometimes they're phased grants as well. How do you pay for something that you want to finish in December of 2024 when you're still waiting for grants that may have been approved, but you're not going to get them for a while?
I think that when you're trying to get that kind of, well, first of all, you try to get the grant, find out what the grants are available, find out what their deadlines are and what their terms are between. Your deadline is here for, and they'll make a decision about a yes or no, and you would receive the money in this time frame. And we can modify that some with the terms of any loan or anything that we take. For example, if somebody's going to give us $200,000 or $1 million or something, we can set it up that you can do a short-term borrowing on the million and then go ahead and pay that right back without making it part of the bond or something. But there's an art to that. But the main thing is that we're starting as early as we can to see how many of these grant cycles we can catch. And we'll apply for anything. It can work. I mean, everybody's telling us, oh, there's a lot of grants out there, but I haven't heard anybody come and say, here, this is a good one to apply for. That's what we're waiting on.
Yeah, I think part of the future discussion also is what are things that might make sense to move to a phase 2 that could be funded by those kinds of grants.
Yeah, sure.
And I would also, the part of the question that I could address regarding grants and having a scheduled construction completion date. Depending on the grants and the size of those grants, it could have an impact on the schedule. The schedule may need to be revised to accommodate that grant cycle. One thing to consider there is that construction costs, labor, material costs, all that tends to increase with time. That's why we have a 1%, 0.5% inflation rate. So you have to weigh that inflation against the grant and when it would be received. It's true.
Yep.
Now, and also, if you're going to borrow against the grant, you have to consider the interest rate you're going to be paying to borrow against the grant.
Right. And that's part of the discussion we can have on the 28th.
Oh, Jennifer has her hand up.
I was just going to say, when we look at the grants, each grant will have requirements, timing requirements, and when they would pay. So there's all the different pieces and they all have to line out, and you have to make sure that you can, a lot of the grants are very spectacular and have not a lot of limitations. Some have very restrictive limitations, and those have to play in if you decide that they're something that you can pallet to go for.
Yep.
Anybody have any other questions or comments?
Not at this time.
You do? Nobody? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a lot to digest. And the meeting.
Do you mind if I say one more thing?
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to say that, CETA and Bremrick are committed to Cannon Beach and finding the path that's right for you. And so as you digest this, to know that we're here to support that process and decision making.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks to everybody for coming. This is a good crowd.
Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.